Hi, my name is Aaron, and this is Old TV Cinema. You know that warm, nostalgic feeling you get rewatching your favorite classic TV shows? The comfort food feeling, the laugh tracks, the familiar faces? Well, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but behind some of the most beloved sets in television history, things were an absolute disaster. And I'm not talking minor inconveniences, I'm talking dangerous stunts, toxic power struggles, brutal weather, and networks that just smiled, collected the ratings, and pretended everything was completely fine. Number 11, MASH. MASH ran for 11 seasons from 1972 to 1983, following the doctors and nurses of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital during the Korean War. It was sharp, funny, heartbreaking, and regularly pulled in some of the largest audiences in television history. The series finale in 1983 drew over 106 million viewers. To this day, that number still hasn't been beaten by a scripted series finale. Let that sink in for a second. But here's what the network wasn't broadcasting. The primary outdoor filming location was Malibu Creek State Park in the hills above Los Angeles. And that location was, to put it diplomatically, absolutely brutal. Summer temperatures on location regularly hit over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The cast and crew were working 12 to 16-hour days in full military costumes under a California sun that showed absolutely zero mercy. The helicopters you see flying through those iconic opening credits weren't just for atmosphere. Real military helicopters were used during production, and the noise, the wind, and the prop wash made filming physically exhausting day after day. And then there was the emotional weight of the material itself. The show tackled death, trauma, and the psychological cost of war in ways that were genuinely unprecedented for network television. Alan Alda, who played Hawkeye Pierce and also directed a number of episodes, later spoke about how the emotional demands of the show accumulated over 11 years in ways that were difficult to fully process. The cast was essentially being asked to dramatize human suffering week after week, season after season, and then go home and pretend it was just a regular job. Behind the camera, the writing staff was under constant pressure to maintain the show's delicate balance between comedy and tragedy. While the network and the studio pushed back on content they considered too dark or too political. The show fought those battles constantly, almost invisibly to the audience. What you saw on screen looked seamless. What was happening behind it was anything but. Number 10, Gilligan's Island. Now, here's a show that sounds like it should have been a vacation to make. Gilligan's Island ran from 1964 to 1967, following 7 castaways stranded on a tropical island after their tour boat got caught in a storm. It was goofy, colorful, and absolutely everywhere in syndication throughout the 1970s and 80s. If you grew up in that era, you watched it. We all watched it. There was basically a law. But here's the thing nobody mentions when they talk about Gilligan's Island. The filming conditions were genuinely miserable. The indoor sets were built on a soundstage at CBS Studio Center in Studio City, California, and the tropical heat that made the island look so lush and humid on screen was unfortunately very real. The studio lights needed to simulate tropical sunshine generated enormous amounts of heat, and the cast spent hours under them in full costume. Bob Denver, who played Gilligan, later recalled that the set temperatures were suffocating and that the physical discomfort of filming was something you just had to push through every single day. And then there was the tension. Creator Sherwood Schwartz and CBS had a famously contentious relationship almost from the beginning. The network never really respected the show creatively, viewing it as disposable entertainment rather than anything worth nurturing. When CBS canceled the show in 1967, it was done with almost no warning, leaving the cast with no proper finale and storylines that were simply abandoned mid-arc. The castaways never officially got rescued on the original series. CBS just pulled the plug. Tina Louise, who played movie star Ginger Grant, has spoken in interviews over the decades about how difficult the experience was professionally, feeling that the show's typecasting impact followed her for years afterward. The cast dynamics were complicated, the network relationship was strained, and the physical conditions were uncomfortable throughout the entire run. But you'd never know any of that watching the finished product, because on screen, everybody was just smiling, doing the hula, and building elaborate contraptions out of coconuts. Number 9, the Dukes of Hazzard. Alright, buckle up for this one. Literally, The Dukes of Hazzard that ran from 1979 to 1985 on CBS, following cousins Bo and Luke Duke outrunning the corrupt boss Hogg and his bumbling sheriff in Hazzard County, Georgia. The show was built almost entirely around car chases, jumps, and stunts, centered on that iconic orange 1969 Dodge Charger, the General Lee. And here is where the story gets genuinely wild. The show destroyed somewhere between 300 and 320 General Lee cars over the course of its run. 300 cars. That is not a typo. The stunts were real, the jumps were real, and the damage was very, very real. The stunt team was under constant pressure to top the previous week's jump, which meant the physical danger escalated steadily throughout the series. Stunt drivers were performing high-speed jumps with minimal safety infrastructure by today's standards, and the production was burning through vehicles and budget at a rate that's kept the network in a permanent state of controlled panic. But the conditions got even more complicated in 1982 when stars John Schneider and Tom Wopat walked off the show in a contract dispute over merchandising royalties. The Duke boys were generating an absolute fortune in toy cars, lunchboxes, and licensed products, and the two lead actors felt they were being cut out of profits they deserved. CBS replaced them with two new cousins, Coy and Vance Duke, played by Byron Cherry and Christopher Mayer. Fans were furious. Ratings collapsed. The network eventually settled with Schneider and Wopat and brought them back, but the damage was done. The show never fully recovered its original momentum. Behind the scenes, the stunt team was working in conditions that no modern production would sanction. The cast was embroiled in a financial war with the studio, and the creative team was trying to hold the whole thing together with duct tape and determination. But on your TV screen every Friday night, it just looked like good old boys having the time of their lives. That's the magic of television, folks. Number 8. Diff'rent Strokes. This one is genuinely difficult to talk about without feeling a certain heaviness, and I think that's exactly the point. Diff'rent Strokes ran from 1978 to 1986 on NBC, and then ABC, following Arnold and Willis Jackson, two kids from Harlem adopted by wealthy Manhattan businessman Philip Drummond. Gary Coleman's Arnold became one of the most recognizable child stars on the planet. The catchphrase was everywhere, the merchandise was everywhere, the ratings were enormous, and the conditions behind the camera were a slow-motion disaster that the network largely ignored for years. Gary Coleman was dealing with serious medical issues throughout the entire run of the show. He had been diagnosed with focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, a kidney disease as a child, and had received 2 kidney transplants by the time he was a teenager. He was on medication throughout filming that affected his growth and his physical well-being, and he was working a punishing production schedule that would have been demanding for a fully healthy adult, let alone a child managing a chronic illness. The network knew, the studio knew, production continued. The broader environment around the young cast members has been well documented in the years since the show ended, with all 3 young leads, Coleman, Dana Plato, and Todd Bridges, facing serious personal struggles that began during and after their time on the show. Multiple cast members have spoken about the lack of adequate support structures for young performers navigating sudden fame, complicated financial arrangements with family and management, and the pressures of carrying a hit network sitcom from childhood through adolescence. The smile that Gary Coleman brought to Arnold Jackson every single week was real talent. What was happening around him was a system that prioritized ratings over the people generating them. Number 7. Baywatch. I'll be honest, when I first went down the research rabbit hole on this one, I was convinced some of what I was reading couldn't possibly be true. I had to go verify it myself because it sounded too wild, and it was all true. Baywatch ran from 1989 to 2001. Though most people remember the peak Hasselhoff era of the early to mid-90s, it followed the lifeguards of Los Angeles County, looked absolutely gorgeous on screen, and became one of the most watched television shows in the entire world at its peak. Syndicated to over 140 countries, genuinely staggering numbers. Here's what those 140 countries didn't know. The Pacific Ocean off the coast of Los Angeles is cold. Not brisk, not refreshing, cold. Average water temperatures around the filming locations hover between 60 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit for much of the year. The cast was required to spend significant portions of their filming days in that water, running into waves, performing rescues, and looking absolutely thrilled about it, because that was the job. Hypothermia was a genuine concern during winter filming months, and the physical demands of performing water rescues on camera, which require multiple takes, meant cast members were spending extended periods in conditions that their immune systems were not particularly enthusiastic about. And then there was the production chaos after NBC canceled the show, after its first season in 1989, citing low ratings. David Hasselhoff and a producer, Grant Reese, essentially rebuilt the show independently, taking it into syndication and transforming it into a global phenomenon. That sounds like a triumphant Hollywood story, and in many ways it is. But the financial structures of an independently syndicated show, operating outside the traditional network safety net, meant the production was constantly working with tight budgets, compressed schedules, and pressures that a network-backed show wouldn't have faced. The wave running looked effortless. The infrastructure behind it was anything but. Number 6. Roseanne. Few shows in television history were as honest about working-class American life as Roseanne, and few shows in television history had a behind-the-scenes environment as turbulent as the one that produced it. Roseanne ran from 1988 to 1997 on ABC following the Connor family of Lanford, Illinois, and it was groundbreaking in ways that still don't get enough credit today. It showed financial stress, complicated marriages, difficult kids, and imperfect parents with a realism that most network television actively avoided. The writer's room was, by multiple accounts, a war zone. Roseanne Barr's control over her own show was the subject of constant escalating battles with producers, network executives, writers, and co-stars throughout the entire run. She famously had multiple showrunners fired, rewrote scripts extensively, and was involved in high-profile public disputes that regularly made the entertainment press. Her co-star and on-screen husband, John Goodman, later spoke about the emotional exhaustion of working in an environment where the ground rules could change at any moment. I personally think this is the most underrated part of the Roseanne story, because here's the complicated truth. A lot of what Barr was fighting for was actually right. She was protecting the authenticity of a show about working-class people against network executives who wanted to soften it, clean it up, and make it more comfortable for advertisers. The battles were real and they were ugly, but a significant number of them were battles worth having. The tension you felt on screen between those characters wasn't entirely manufactured. Some of it was absolutely genuine. By the later season, the creative exhaustion was showing. The production environment had taken its toll on writers, cast, and crew in ways that were becoming increasingly difficult to paper over. What started as a revolutionary piece of television was ending as a show running on fumes and friction. Number 5. Northern Exposure. Okay, here's one that I genuinely love bringing up because the reaction is always the same. People go, "Wait, really? That show?" Northern Exposure ran from 1990 to 1995 on CBS, following a young New York doctor named Joel Fleischman, who gets assigned to the tiny fictional town of Sisley, Alaska, as repayment for his medical school scholarship. It was quirky, warm, beautifully written, and won the Emmy for Outstanding Drama Series in 1992. It was beloved, still is. And it was filmed primarily in Roslyn, Washington, which sounds fine until you learn what a Pacific Northwest winter actually feels like when you're standing outside in it for 12 hours a day. The production team chose Roslyn because it had the look of a remote Alaskan town without the logistical nightmare of actually filming in Alaska. What they got instead was a filming location that delivered genuine cold, genuine rain, and genuine isolation, in quantities that the cast and crew had not entirely anticipated. The outdoor scenes that look so atmospheric and beautifully moody on screen were often filmed in genuinely miserable conditions, with cast members braving temperatures and precipitation that required the kind of determination you don't usually expect from a critically acclaimed drama about quirky small-town life. But the more serious condition issue was the psychological toll of the location itself. Roslyn is not a major metropolitan area. The cast was living and working in a small-town environment, often for extended stretches during production, and the isolation compounded the pressures of an already demanding production schedule. By the show's later seasons, multiple cast members were dealing with the accumulated fatigue of years of location and filming, in conditions that, while not life-threatening, were genuinely draining, in ways that showed up in contract negotiations, creative disputes, and eventually Rob Morrow's departure before the final season. The show you watched looked like a warm hug. The show they were making felt considerably less cozy. Number 4. Hill Street Blues. This is the one I want to spend a little extra time on, because I genuinely believe Hill Street Blues is one of the most important television shows ever made, and the conditions under which it was produced are a massive part of that story that almost never gets told properly. Hill Street Blues ran from 1981 to 1987 on NBC, following the officers of a fictional inner-city police precinct. It essentially invented the template for modern television drama. The serialized storytelling, the large ensemble cast with overlapping storylines, the morally complicated characters, the cinema verite visual style. Every prestige drama you have ever loved owes a direct debt to Hill Street Blues, and I mean every single one. Creator Steven Bochco and his team were building something that had genuinely never been done before on network television, which meant they were also working without a map. The production schedule was brutal. The writing demands were extraordinary. The show maintained an ensemble cast of over a dozen significant characters, all of whom needed fully developed storylines every single week, which meant the writer's room was operating under a level of sustained creative pressure that would be difficult to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. The filming style added another layer of physical difficulty. The handheld camera work and documentary visual approach that gave the show its distinctive look also meant longer shooting days, more setups per scene, and physical demands on the technical crew that traditional multi-camera sitcom productions simply didn't involve. This was single-camera drama television being made in the early 1980s with the ambition of a prestige film and the schedule and budget of a network procedural. This is one of those things I find myself randomly thinking about at 2 in the morning. The people who made Hill Street Blues were essentially running a marathon every week for 6 years. And the television landscape we live in today, the one that gave us The Sopranos and The Wire and Breaking Bad, exists because they didn't stop running. Number 3. Yachtstalt, the A-Team. The A-Team ran from 1983 to 1987 on NBC, and it was the definition of pure adrenaline television. Hannibal, Face, Murdoch, and B.A. Barrackes, played by the magnificent Mr. Tisa, were a team of former Special Forces operatives who spent every episode building elaborate contraptions and blowing things up with the destructive enthusiasm of a 12-year-old who just discovered what a propane tank does when it gets warm. The show loved explosions the way Norm Peterson loved beer. And here's the thing about those explosions. They were real. The A-Team's stunt and special effects team was operating in an era before the level of computer-generated imagery that modern productions rely on, which meant that when something exploded on the A-Team, something actually exploded. The stunt work was live. The pyrotechnics were live. The car crashes were live. And the safety protocols of early 1980s television production were, to be charitable, somewhat less comprehensive than what you'd find on a modern set. The show's production pace was relentless. NBC was getting enormous ratings, and the network wanted product delivered on schedule, which meant the stunt team and effects crew were executing complex, genuinely dangerous sequences under time pressure that left limited room for the kind of careful preparation that dangerous work actually requires. Multiple stunt performers dealt with injuries during the show's run, though the network's communications team was quite good at ensuring those stories didn't travel far. And then there was the creative environment, which we touched on briefly in our Chuck Cunningham Syndrome video. George Peppard, who played Hannibal, had strong opinions about how the show should be run and who should be at the center of it. The interpersonal dynamics on set were complicated in ways that showed up in the work and in the behind-the-scenes negotiations that followed. The team on screen looked like they had the whole thing handled. The team making the show was frequently improvising. Number 2. Twin Peaks. Now, We're getting into truly fascinating territory, and I want to be upfront that this one is a little different from everything else on this list, because the terrible conditions on Twin Peaks weren't terrible in the conventional sense of dangerous stunts or brutal weather or network interference. They were terrible in a very specific, very David Lynch way that I'm not sure the English language is entirely equipped to describe. Twin Peaks ran for 2 seasons from 1990 to 1991 on ABC, created by David Lynch and Mark Frost. It followed FBI agent Dale Cooper investigating the murder of homecoming queen Laura Palmer in the small Washington logging town of Twin Peaks. It was strange, hypnotic, deeply unsettling, and like nothing that had ever been on network television before, or, honestly, since. The cast was largely kept in the dark, deliberately. This wasn't an accident or an oversight. Lynch had a specific philosophy about performance that involved not giving actors the complete picture of what their character was doing or why, because he believed that genuine confusion and uncertainty produced a quality of performance that conscious understanding couldn't replicate, which is a fascinating artistic philosophy, and also, by every account from the people who had to live it, genuinely disorienting to experience from the inside. Cast members have described reading scripts and genuinely not understanding what they were being asked to do, not in the ordinary sense of needing clarification, but in a more fundamental sense of not being able to locate a logical framework for the scene that would allow them to make traditional acting decisions. And Lynch famously was not always forthcoming with explanations. Add to this the filming location, which was primarily in the Snoqualmie Valley area of Washington state, with all the atmospheric rain and cold and fog that implies, and a production environment that was simultaneously brilliant and chaotic. And you have a set experience that cast members have described in interviews with a kind of shell-shocked wonder that is really something to listen to. Kyle MacLachlan, Cheryl Lee, and others have reflected on the Twin Peaks experience in terms that suggest it left a permanent mark. The show looked like a dream, making it apparently felt like one too. Not entirely the good kind. Number 1, the original Star Trek. And here we are, the one I promised you at the top. And I want to say up front that I spent 3 hours researching this specific entry, and what I found genuinely shocked me, because the story of how the original Star Trek survived long enough to become one of the most influential cultural phenomena in human history is a story about people doing extraordinary work under conditions that were specifically designed, whether intentionally or not, to make success impossible. Star Trek ran for 3 seasons from 1966 to 1969 on NBC. It followed the crew of the USS Enterprise exploring the galaxy, and it gave us Spock and Kirk and Uhura and Scotty and Bones and the Tricorder and the Transporter and the Prime Directive and a vision of humanity's future that was genuinely radical for its time. Diverse crew, female officers in positions of authority, a black woman as a communications officer at a time when that was not a given on American television. An alien first officer is one of the lead characters. For 1966 network television, this was not a small thing. NBC was not particularly enthusiastic about any of it. The network's relationship with the show was adversarial almost from the beginning. The original pilot, featuring Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike, was rejected by NBC as too cerebral, too slow, and, in words that have become genuinely legendary in television history, too intellectual. NBC asked for a second pilot, which was unusual. Gene Roddenberry delivered one featuring William Shatner as Captain Kirk, and the show was greenlit. But the network's ambivalence never fully resolved itself into support. The budget was the front line of this war, and it was a brutal one. The effects budget for Star Trek was genuinely inadequate for what the show was trying to accomplish. The team, led by special effects supervisor Jim Rugg and others, were being asked to visualize deep space travel, alien planets, futuristic technology, and large-scale sci-fi sequences on a budget that would make a modern YouTube creator uncomfortable. They built solutions out of ingenuity, reused footage constantly, cannibalized effects shots from episode to episode, and improvised solutions to production problems that had no precedent in television history because nobody had tried to make a show like this before. The writer's room was working at a pace that was genuinely unsustainable. Roddenberry was passionate, driven, and had a specific, uncompromising vision for what the show needed to be. He rewrote scripts extensively. He had conflicts with writers, directors, and network executives with a frequency and intensity that made the production environment a constant negotiation between his vision and everyone else's practical limitations. Writer Dorothy Fontana, who wrote some of the show's most beloved episodes, has spoken candidly in interviews about the conditions under which the writing staff operated and the toll those conditions took. By season 3, NBC had moved the show to the Friday 10 p.m. time slot, which in 1968 was effectively a death sentence. The move came with a budget cut. The network was essentially parking the show somewhere it would fail quietly, without having to make the awkward decision to cancel something that had a loud and devoted fan base. It worked. The show's ratings declined. It was canceled at the end of season 3. And then something happened that nobody at NBC fully anticipated. The show went into syndication. It started airing in reruns across local stations throughout the early 1970s. A new generation of viewers found it. The fan base grew. The letters kept coming. And in 1979, a motion picture was released, beginning one of the longest-running and most successful franchise expansions in entertainment history. The people who made the original Star Trek, the ones who showed up every day to a set where the budget was wrong, the network was indifferent, the schedule was punishing, and the tools were inadequate for the job. Those people built the foundation of something that is still going more than 50 years later. They did it under conditions specifically calibrated to produce failure. And they built something that outlasted everyone who doubted them. That, to me, is the whole point of this list. The discomfort, the chaos, the impossible conditions, none of it showed on screen. What showed on screen was the work. And the work, in case you need a reminder, was extraordinary. And that's our list. 11 beloved TV shows that were secretly filmed in genuinely terrible conditions that almost nobody talked about while they were happening. What strikes me every time I go down this particular research rabbit hole is how invisible all of this was to the audience. You sat in your living room, you watched MASH or Star Trek or Hill Street Blues, and what came through the screen was craft and commitment and storytelling. The heat and the budget wars and the dangerous stunts and the exhausted writers, none of it transferred. The work absorbed all of it. I think there's something genuinely inspiring about that, if you're willing to sit with it for a minute. Which of these surprised you the most? Drop your answer in the comments section below, because I read every single one and I genuinely want to know. And if you have a behind-the-scenes story about a classic TV show that you think belongs on this list, tell me that too, because there is easily a part 2 living inside this topic, and your suggestions always make these lists better. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe to Old TV Cinema so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more forgotten stories, more disappeared characters, and more classic television chaos on the way. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.